Hey guys, Metal Rose here, and who do we have over here on Zoom?
David Myers, I'm here.
Metal Dave, and then we have
Oh, Dave.
and we're back reading part two of John Schaefer's court transcripts. I'm sporting my Iced Earth Christmas t-shirt, long sleeve t-shirt. It's pretty awesome. Go to the Iced Earth store. There is a sale going on. Everything's either 25 or 35% off, depending on what it is. IcedEarthMerch.com. We're going to get started reading these court transcripts, which I had open. And here they are. Okay.
That was faster than most attorneys.
Just like a little summary. So we just finished all of the statements from the band members and all of the different people that John had come out and give a statement on his behalf. And now we're going to continue on. They kind of comment on the different people who were there and everything. And here we go.
Mr. Marcantel, and Judge, as we informed your staff, we had originally planned to have 5 character witness. Unfortunately, the 5th had a medical emergency and could not be here. But I certainly want to acknowledge the other people you see here in the gallery who are not speaking today, who traveled across the country to be here in support of John, including the pastor of his church and members of his congregation, other members of law enforcement who came here to support him, friends, and family. So I certainly wanted to acknowledge those for the record.
And fans.
Fair enough.
And us.
Yeah.
The court. All right. Welcome to all of you. Thank you for being here.
Did you feel good being acknowledged, Dave?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely.
I was like, okay, cool, but I didn't really need it. I was just like, yeah, I know you were thrilled.
And, before they called us all in, John coming up to me, shaking my hand and, thanking me for his support. That's something I'm never going to forget.
Well, that was nice. Yeah, that was
That,
really
that was like mind blowing.
yes, absolutely. It was just really surreal for me too. I've been like putting in all of this work and I'm just like, oh my God, this is the moment. And I'm
Like,
exhausted. It's like 10 o'clock in the morning. I'm like, this is the moment.
yeah. I,
Am I asleep? Like it was like a dream, you know?
walking down that hallway, seeing Matt, Freddie, and John, obviously, it's like this inner 17-year-old in my
You know,
head.
you were like,
Like,
is that him? Is that John? Where's John? Like, and I kept making jokes throughout the whole Washington, D.C. trip that we were walking down the street, or like all of us, even we're walking into the courtroom to the night court theme. So like look up the night court theme if you want to feel the true vibes of that day.
bow,
At
bow,
least on our part.
bow, 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 bow,
I'll
bow,
link
bow,
it
bow,
below.
bow.
Night court.
Anyway, let's continue.
All right. So is there anything further that either side wishes to raise before we proceed with the allocutions? Ms. Rakowski, not for the government, Your Honor. Mr. Marcantel, no, Judge. The court, all right. So why don't we begin with Ms. Rakowski? Ms. Rakowski, thank you, Your Honor. I don't have much to say beyond what the government submitted in its sentencing memorandum. Mr. Schaffer is obviously here today before the court to be sentenced on very serious offenses. Not only participated in the attack on the Capitol on January 6th, but he was among the first through the door during one of the breaches of the Capitol that day. We submitted video to the court from the Capitol surveillance video that shows Mr. Schaffer not exactly the first through the door, but sort of pushing the first through, and then angrily gesturing and yelling at the officers who were trying to stand their ground and defend the building that day. His participation and his role in this very dark day in our country is incredibly grave and incredibly serious conduct, and for that, he is meriting of the felony conviction that he now carries with him. On the flip side, he did not directly engage in assaultive behavior with any officers that day. He didn't make contact with anyone. He didn't hurt anyone. He didn't destroy any property. And as we noted in our memorandum, he was in the building for less than 10 minutes. He also was not part of a conspiracy as other members of a group that he was affiliated with have been alleged to have been and have been convicted of being, and that's a significant fact from the government's point of view. Mr. Schaffer has faced punishment in this matter. He has been detained pre-trial for approximately 3 months. He has had this matter obviously hanging over his head and limiting, in some ways, his ability to live his life for the last 3.5 to 4 years. Most notably, from the government's perspective, he has fully accepted responsibility. He did so at really the earliest possible juncture, and it is hard to state the significance of being the first human being to plead guilty to an offense involving the attack on the Capitol. That was frankly brave, and it does show fulsome acceptance of responsibility. That part of owning his role and what he did that day is incredibly important, not only from the perspective of the court and looking at what level of specific deterrence he needs, we would suggest not much. He has shown that he understands the wrongfulness of his conduct, and he has made efforts to atone for it. It also goes a long way in showing his desire to help the nation and the city heal from what happened that day. And from the government's perspective, it really can't be overstated. The significance of accepting responsibility and cooperating with the law enforcement investigation that Mr. Schaffer has engaged in. So, from the government's perspective, a probationary sentence is sufficient here, in the light of both the time that Mr. Schaffer served, his cooperation, his acceptance of responsibility. Probation is sufficient in this case to recognize the severity of the offense, while also giving credit for Mr. Schaffer's acceptance of responsibility in his cooperation in this case. Thank you, Your Honor.
Anyway,
He's concerned.
Rusty's concerned. He's concerned. That was a lot to take in at the time. So everybody was very soft-spoken that day, and it was hard to like take complete notes. You know, they really need to have like microphones, like it's a concert hall. You really can't hear anything. But I did the best I could. I think I sort of got the gist of it, but of course, again, I'm gonna rewrite an article all about the transcripts, and that's why we're reading the transcripts because, you know, I'm one person, I can only write down so much and understand so much at a time, and it was all going really fast. Metal Dave over here didn't take that many notes. So
I mean, I think so far from what I've read, Rose did a pretty good
I,
job of doing a little summary from her notes in the courtroom.
I didn't have to. You were taking all the notes you needed.
Yeah, people were
Handing it.
apparently people could hear me taking the notes.
I've always found taking notes to be useless. I write stuff down and then never look at them. So,
Well, I would have looked at them.
halfway through that, that hearing, I just put the notebook down and paid attention.
As someone who did like most of his pre-med, I will say that taking notes is very helpful.
Yeah, I mean, you know, notes. You know what it is, guys? I'm like really self-conscious about things. Like if I get like one thing wrong, it's like I got everything wrong. I can't help but be like that. It's just like the perfectionist in me. I think I actually did a pretty good job taking notes that day. Like when I went through the court transcripts, I really think I actually did a pretty good job of comprehending and understanding everything. So I worked really hard on all of this, and I paid great attention that day, and I was starting to like second guess certain things, but I got a lot of things right that I thought I didn't get right. So, and I'm willing to admit like when I did get things wrong too, but I just wanted to throw that out there. I also just wanted to say, you know, I was put down my whole life, so I'm not used to feeling intelligent in any way. I'm just going to be honest with you. So this is one of the first times in my life that I feel like I've actually gotten things on point. Maybe because I'm getting praise from people in the community, or maybe it's just because I'm starting to believe in myself, but in any case, I just... Wow. Anyway.
The court. All right, Mr. Kowski, thank you. All right, I'll hear from the defense counsel. Mr. Victor, happy Friday, Judge. The court, happy Friday. Mr. Victor, Judge, with the court's permission, Mr. Schaffer would like to allocate at this time. He's intending to read his previous statement, which is on page 31 of the sentencing memorandum. And then I'll make some comments after that. The court, okay, Mr. Schaffer. Defendant, Your Honor, I take full responsibility for my actions on January 6, 2021. The pain and embarrassment and impulsive behavior inflicted on my family, friends, and fans has left a mark on my life that will not soon fade. I never intended to be disrespectful to all the honorable people who have fought for and love our great nation. I deeply regret the devastation and irreversible damage my actions contributed to on that day. I also regret allowing myself to be misled by people on all sides of the political spectrum who intentionally sought to sow the seeds of division among us. America is a great nation because we celebrate and prosper from our rich diversity. As an international musician, I have traveled the world for over 3 decades with a goal to bring joy and unity to people of all ethnicities, races, cultures, religions, and political affiliations. We are all humans first. We need to put our individual disagreements aside and come together so that we can realize the open and free society all reasonable people desire. I've learned a lot and grown from this experience. I am committed to improving myself going forward. I apologize to my fan base and supporters all around the world for disappointing you. You've always been so good and loyal to me, and I'm sorry I let you down, and I will work to rebuild your trust. And Your Honor, I will accept and take responsibility with whatever sentence you deem fitting. You have my word. I won't let you down. The court. All right. Thank you, Mr. Schaffer. Mr. Schaffer, if you want to have a seat, go ahead. The defendant. Okay. Mr. Victor. Thank you, Judge. Judge, I've been practicing over 30 years now. It's hard to believe it's gone by that quickly. And I've done cases all over the nation. And generally, I'm a big defender of our criminal justice system. I speak publicly a lot about it. And I have a lot of great things to say about how we handle cases here in the United States. But there are some things we could do better on. One of the things I wish we could do a little differently, Judge, is that I know we can't, and I would love to just take you, Mr. Schaffer, and go to the closest coffee house and sit down over a cappuccino, because in 15 to 30 minutes, the feel you would get of who this guy is, it's not something I can communicate to you here in this forum. And I think that's unfortunate. There will be some things lost in translation here, and it's my job, heavy duty, really, to do my best to convey who this person is in such a short time to you. Mr. Schaffer is, in my opinion, a very special and unique human being. We've presented lots of information to you. You have a very comprehensive mitigation report that we submitted to you, but it still seems insufficient. I will say it's been my great honor and pleasure to not just represent Mr. Schaffer, but to get to know him as well, and I consider him a friend. Judge, he's remorseful. I hope that came across to you today from a witness and from the brief time Mr. Schaffer was up here. He truly regrets what he did, and I think that's evident by how quickly he took responsibility here, Judge. I had some contacts in Phoenix in the FBI, and I called them, and it took a few days for them to get back to me. It would have been faster, Judge, if I had known the right person to call. He immediately cooperated. He did everything that was within his power to assist with the prosecution in this case. And Judge, as you know, in a criminal case, mens rea is important. It's critical. And I offer this not as a defense for what he did, but as a mitigation, as an explanation. What was going on between his ears, Judge, we can't ignore. What he believed was that the election was fraudulent and the country was on the verge of a takeover in an inappropriate, unconstitutional, illegal kind of way. He thought our country was under attack. He was wrong, but that's what he believed, Judge. He admits in his statement, you heard him say, he was definitely misled here. He was, I believe, intentionally misled by people on all sides of the political spectrum. And this is huge, and I'm sure you know, Judge, this is probably one of the biggest problems we have right now. Maybe not just in our country, but in the world. What's true? What are the facts? How do you find out what's true? Facts are important because they cause people to be motivated to do different things.
And if you see me and Dave English looking at each other and laughing, it has nothing to do with the court case, but everything to do with Rusty meowing at us. I don't know if you could hear the meowing on the recording, though. That's why I wanted to interject and say something. And here he is, hanging out.
Judge, he was misled by people in the executive branch. Not the people here today, but there were people in the executive branch. And I have to say, it crossed my mind at the beginning of this case to think, wait a second, he believed the things he was told by the people in the executive branch, the same branch that is now prosecuting him for believing the things they said and acting consistently with what he believed. And I thought about maybe bringing a defense here that I could call government estoppel. I don't know if you would have allowed it. I don't know if it's even a defense, but it seemed to fit the facts to me, Judge. Something about that didn't sit right with me and still doesn't sit right with me. Again, I only offer it in mitigation, Judge. He recognizes he was misled here. He wasn't involved in organizing anything. He acted alone. What drew him to the Oath Keepers, Judge, was the sound of the organization, keeping your oath to the Constitution, to the principles of our nation. That's what drew him to the group. That's the only thing that drew him to the group. He wasn't involved in any planning or meetings. There were no text messages going back and forth. He supported the idea of keeping your oath to a man of high character who believes honor is important, that your word is important. That's what attracted him to the Oath Keepers. Now, did they live up to that? No. Were they those kind of people? No. Was he involved in any of that? No. Yes, he had the hat. That was about as involved as he was, Judge. He knew some people. That's it. He didn't steal or damage any. No acts of violence. He didn't even try to use any violence. He didn't threaten any violence. He had bear spray in his hand, Judge. But again, why he had the bear spray in his hand is important. Again, he was misled. What he believed was that he was going to a peaceful protest that day. And there were going to be other groups of people, a group called Antifa, who might be there and show up and try to be violent and disrupt the peaceful protest or peaceful event they had going on. That's why he had the bear spray. You might think, why did he have it in his hand when he entered the Capitol? I asked him that question. The reason he had it in his hand, Judge, because as you could see in that video, people were pushing and shoving, and he could feel tugging going on at the side where he had the bear spray. He didn't want it taken from him. He didn't want it to fall to the ground. So he put his hand to hold it, to secure it. That's the reason he had it. He never pointed at anybody, never threatened anybody with it. It was 100% defensive, which, of course, is consistent with everything else about this guy's life. There is no aggression in his past. He doesn't support aggression. It's all about defensive force. He was present there. He had absolutely no role in forcing those doors open. The doors were open. People were filling in already. He was in there, as counsel for the government said, less than 10 minutes. Essentially, that was the totality of his involvement. He made a very bad split-second decision on the day in question. And that's what he believes today, Judge. He knows he was misled. He knows he made a bad. He wishes he could go back and change that. Talk to him about it a million times. His experience in custody, Judge, was not what an experience in custody should be in a first world country. It was excruciating experience. He explained to me he was in solitary the whole time, freezing cold, frigid. People were throwing feces at him in there. As you know, Judge, he agreed to cooperate and to make it public after he was released. But unfortunately, there was some kind of mistake with the technology. And I know the court remembers this because the court made a comment about learning about this on a report. I think it was Politico. Somehow everything got leaked to the press while Mr. Schaffer was still in custody, including his home address, Judge. All of that out there. He's a public figure, which made it far worse than for the normal person to have this information, including their home address, leaked and broadcast on national news.
And can, like, you imagine, like, having your address leaked even if you weren't famous, like, and you were involved with that day? It would just be really anyway.
When he finally got home, Judge, they were fired in his front yard, around his front yard. He doesn't know, and I don't know, and I can't say that was definitely connected to this cooperation in this case, but it's the only time he's ever experienced that's by his home. My point here, Judge, is he's suffered. He's had more than normal amount of risk somebody would take when cooperating. Not only that, Judge, a lifetime career of being a musician instantly destroyed. He was canceled by everyone, everything. All his credit cards canceled. Even to this day, Judge, we had dinner last night, and he told me last night, I just got this credit card canceled. He would have loved to have made a public statement early on in this case. We helped him draft it, just to say to the world, sorry, I made a huge mistake. I regret it. It's my fault. No, I'm not a racist. I've never been racist. I'm about peace, love, and freedom, and the greatest of our nation and the greatest of people. He would have loved to have said that, Judge. He didn't. And to be fair, we had many conversations with the counsel for the government on this point. And while each time we were told Mr. Schaffer has a First Amendment right, we can't tell him he can't make a statement. It was very clear to us, Judge, that would be frowned upon by the government. And for that reason alone, Mr. Schaffer, in the entire 3.5 years, never made a statement.
So, can you imagine not being able to make a statement at all for several years? And you have lots of people waiting and hoping and praying that you're going to make a statement. Tons of fans around the world. I can't imagine going through that.
But this resulted to his great detriment, Judge. People, fans, incorrectly assumed the worst. They were furious at him. He received endless comments online, hate mail, countless online horrible comments, damaged his relationship with his daughter because he couldn't put a public statement out there. People know who her dad is. We submitted what I would call an extraordinarily comprehensive report, Judge. 31 people were interviewed in that report. The flavor of the comments from Mr. Schaffer, in my view, are unbelievable. They spoke of his warmth, his kindness, his decency, his loyalty. I'm sure it's not an uncommon thing to say in this courtroom. His parents were divorced when he was 3. That was hard on him. But, Judge, he grew up very patriotic, very pro-America. Formed a band called Sons of Liberty. Stepfather passed away when he was very young. His father's death also hit him very hard. Didn't stop him from being productive, Judge. The guy's been writing poetry and song lyrics since 9th grade. Dropped out of school at age 16 to pursue this music career. It's a story of dedication, commitment, Judge. Put this career on hold for his daughter. Stopped when he saw the toll it was taking on his family. Took 2 years off to be a dad because that's important to him. He is very dedicated, non-racist, loves and accepts people of all types. He's pro-police. He's pro-law and order, extraordinarily generous. Started working at age 6, Judge, in the family business. Been hardworking his entire life. His success in the music industry is amazing. Signed to a German record label in 1989, success begins to grow. Solid reputation, as you heard today, Judge, honesty, loyalty, humbleness. He creates 27 albums in 32 years. Some of them go gold and platinum in Greece. And he's working full-time now, Judge, for a major retailer. And somehow this guy who's suffering through a prosecution because of what he did becomes the well-being ambassador. That says something to me, Judge. I hope it says something to you. He has many long-term friends. I don't know that there's anything somebody accomplishes during their short time being alive on this planet more important than accumulating long-term real friends. He's got people who came here today who were long-term friends, but the record we submit is replete with people, multiple decades of friendships. You don't get that, Judge, by having low character, by not being where you're supposed to be and following through on what you promise. I think it's the best measure of a person. The guy's performed in over 100 countries, Judge. He's gained an incredible appreciation for different cultures, different people. Incredibly patriotic. I've never met anyone more patriotic than John Schaffer. I think you have most of the information, but suffice to say the guy has got a Benjamin Franklin tattoo, a Thomas Jefferson, and a George Washington tattoo on his body, among other pro-patriotic tattoos. You could see, Judge, why a guy like that, who thinks erroneously our country is under attack, might be motivated to action for what he believes are the right reasons. He's a positive guy, Judge. He doesn't hold grudges. He doesn't blame anyone but himself. You got the comments of people. I'm not going to go through them and waste the court's time on that. He's peaceful, nonviolent guy. Judge, he's successfully been on pre-trial release now for 3.5 years. I have no doubt, if you see fit to put him on probation, he will be a star in probation office. There's absolutely no purpose to additional incarceration here. I also note that he has some health issues that we submitted as Exhibit C to the mitigation report and to our sentencing memorandum. I think about the different purposes of sentencing, Judge. Deterrence. I agree with counsel for the government here. Specific deterrence. Absolutely no need for that. He gets it, Judge. General deterrence. This is a big prosecution. I think that the message is said very clear to the community. This kind of activity is going to be punished appropriately by the United States. I think about rehabilitation. I think, does John Schaffer need to be rehabilitated? I think he's pretty well rehabilitated as a result of what he's done over the last 3.5 years. That brings me to punishment, Judge. How much punishment is appropriate? I don't ever know. None of us really know. Nobody knows what the appropriate amount of punishment is. But for the 10 minutes he spent inside the Capitol, I would suggest that the 3 months of misery he went through living in a cage like an animal, the destruction of his lifetime of work, which I hope he will work to rebuild at some point, I think those are significant punishments, Judge. And I think that is adequate punishment. And again, the guy has absolutely no priors, Judge. He also, I'll note for the court, and I don't know if the court's aware of this, he is fighting now a civil lawsuit as a result of this. Even though he didn't damage anything or take anything or hurt anybody, he's facing a very substantial civil lawsuit. Essentially would break him financially. That we are going to do our best to defend him on, but he really doesn't have the resources, given what he makes at that retailer, to defend a lawsuit like this. He suffered a lot of collateral damages. His cooperation, Judge, I can't overstate that. You're right in saying he didn't testify, but that is something he doesn't control, as you know. It's the reason we pushed the case back so far, because there was the threat to other people in the world that he might testify. That's of substantial value. He was the first guy to plead, Judge. Wasn't lost on me at the time, or him, how important that would be at this moment to this court. And I know this court understands that. Substantial assistance to the government is something that's not disputed here. That's why we agree with the government's recommendation, of course, to probation. 3 years is fine, Judge. The 120 hours of community service, when I told Mr. Schaffer about that, he had a smile on his face. He's happy to do community service. He does this anyway. 6 months of home confinement, I gotta say, I don't understand that recommendation, Judge. The court, I think Ms. Rakowski has acknowledged that the government that was an error. Mr. Victor, okay, Judge, the court, that's not what they're recommending. Mr. Victor, I was prohibited by the deal we made with the government for arguing for different departures. But I note, mitigation role might have been something I argued. Certainly, abhorrent conduct would have been something. You can consider this in terms of variance or other factors if you want, and I would encourage you to do that. And that just leaves me with the $2,000 in restitution. Judge, this is sort of unconnected to anything, right? Nobody has a figure here to say that he cost $2,000 in damage. The reality is he didn't cost anything in damages. I'm not saying he shouldn't be held to something for restitution. I just think, given the damage to his career, the civil lawsuit that's pending, maybe, and what he makes, maybe $2,000 is a little bit too much for restitution. I would suggest that maybe something like $200 would be appropriate. I think he contributes to fixing what was done here and it's not more ominous than it needs to be. So that would be my request on the restitution amount. Thank you, Judge, for allowing me this time to speak on Mr. Schaffer's behalf. That was my favorite part of the whole thing.
It was good.
Well, I'm just going to say all of that was an emotional roller coaster. John had a really good lawyer. And now we're going to hear the judge's remarks. The government has adopted arguments it made in the related case of United States versus Rhodes 22-CR-15. We filed a pretty extensive restitution pleading in that matter, and so we adopted in our sentencing memorandum here the factual basis that we laid out there for the $2,000 figure. The court, okay, Mr. Victor. We agree with that, Judge. The court. Okay. Thank you, counsel, for your presentations. So let me just begin and restate what the guidelines are. There are 0 to 6 months here with a fine range of $2,000 to $20,000. In addition to the guidelines, I must consider all the factors that are set forth in 18 U.S.C. 3553A and impose a sentence that's sufficient but not greater than necessary to achieve the objectives of sentencing set forth in the statute. The factors I must consider are the nature and circumstances of the offense and the history and characteristics of the defendant. The need for the sentence imposed to reflect the seriousness of the offense, to promote respect for the law, and to provide just punishment for the offense, to afford adequate deterrence to protect the public, and to provide the defendant with any needed educational or vocational training or medical care. I should also consider the kind of sentences available and the need to avoid unwarranted disparities. Let me just begin, if I can, with just the need for the sentence imposed to reflect the seriousness of the offense, promote respect for the law, and to provide just punishment. And certainly, we'll talk about the conduct and its context in a moment. But certainly, any sentence should reflect those factors given the seriousness of the conduct and the importance of the promotion of respect for the law, particularly in this context. Of course, Mr. Schaffer has served 23 days already of incarceration, and so he has already suffered some amount of punishment that meets those factors. In terms of deterrence, again, January 6th cases, I think certainly our sentencings, mine included, have been driven by the need for general deterrence. I think in Mr. Schaffer's case, specific deterrence is less of a concern because of a lack of criminal history in his cooperation and his pretrial conduct. In terms of disparities, the defense has pointed out that there were 2, if not 3, other Oath Keepers who received sentences of probation, the Parkers and Mr. Isaacs. Truth be told, they're a little bit differently situated than Mr. Schaffer is, and their sentences were what they were for slightly different reasons, and so I'm not sure they're perfect comparators, and frankly, given Mr. Schaffer's complete profile here, truth be told, there really isn't a comparator that I am aware of. So, in terms of history and characteristics, he's now 56 years old, grew up in Florida, and then lived in Indiana. He left high school early, began his music career, twice married and divorced, has an 18-year-old daughter. I'm terribly sorry to hear about the strain it has put on your relationship with her. As counsel noted, he has some health issues. Currently employed with a retailer, and as counsel noted, has worked his way up the chain not only to show he's progressed in his work, but he's actually been doing something in the capacity where he helps his fellow colleagues and others in the workplace. And that really speaks well of him. I'll talk about his music career in a moment. Certainly someone who, from all of the letters that I reviewed and the memo, is someone who, kind, hardworking, honest, caring, all of the words that have been used to describe Mr. Schaffer, I have no reason to doubt them. So let's just talk about the nature and the circumstances of the offense. Mr. Schaffer joined the Oath Keepers sometime in November 2020, motivated in part by concerns about the election and the integrity of the election. Attended a march in D.C. in November 2020 where he certainly used words that he was suggesting that he and others may be prepared to act violently given concerns about the election. He was not otherwise active in the Oath Keepers, and to his good fortune, whether it be intentional or not, was not on any signal chat or didn't participate in any conference call. And Mr. Schaffer, whether that was something that was intentional or fortuitous, it turns out to be one of the better decisions or circumstances that you've encountered, because obviously if you had been on those signal communications or in those teleconferences or had further communications with others, the charges would be even more serious than those you face. You came to DC on the 6th wearing a tactical vest carrying the bear spray. Did leave the ellipse and march to the Capitol with thousands of others. You knew that the electoral vote count was underway and that the vice president had planned to go forward with the certification, entered the Capitol around 2:40 p.m. through the Senate parliamentarian's office door. I feel like Dr. Evil when I looked at you. I have to do that again. Like, you
I have to
know,
do that again.
like well, no, when he like, it's like $100 billion. Sorry, just a $1 million are like they just laugh at him through the Senate parliamentarian's office door. There, a group of officers who were present attempting to keep the crowd back were pushed back into the hallway. I'm not suggesting that Mr. Schaffer was responsible for pushing those officers back, but he certainly is one of the first people to enter once those officers were pushed back. Video evidence did show that Mr. Schaffer was pointing at the officers. We can't obviously make out what he was saying, but it certainly was not complimentary, I'm sure. I guess most people yell terrible things at the cops. That's why I'm laughing. I'm sorry. It took the spraying of some chemical irritant for him to ultimately leave, and thankfully it was within 10 minutes. He's admitted importantly that his intent was to obstruct the proceedings that were going on that day, impairing the ballots that he might have encountered if he had been permitted to proceed any further. Look, I've been like all of my colleagues presiding over this case for a number of years. I actually remember quite well the day I learned that Mr. Schaffer was going to plead guilty and cooperate. It was, to say the least, a big deal, not only because the events of January 6th, but because the symbolism of not just taking responsibility, but agreeing to cooperate, in my view, was quite powerful and remains quite powerful. I'll say regrettably, Mr. Schaffer, and this is not at all a critique of your decision, it didn't quite have the effect that I thought it was going to. And I certainly thought that your example would cause others to come forward similarly and acknowledge what they had done and cooperate to the extent that they were able to. That didn't really happen.
Yeah, I remember that part.
Basically, like, there's the comment right there, like, that I was basically trying to convey in my article, that John was not as fruitful to the investigation and, like, you know, it wasn't as powerful as they had hoped.
Right. Their
There's,
intention was to try to use him as an example to get more people to come forth and to get more information on of the Oath Keepers through him. And it turned out that obviously he had next to no dealings with them. So the judge himself is admitting that we were intentionally trying to do that and we were wrong, which is
yeah.
important.
Yeah, it is, you know, I mean, just saying it without saying it, basically.
Yeah, that's what they mean by cooperation.
Yeah.
You know.
And for years, people continue to this day, continue to deny what they did, the significance of what they did, the role that they played in the events of that day, and what that day actually represented, and its place in our history, and the mark it's left. People are quick to forget. People are quick to want to move past it. People want to recharacterize what happened that day. Everybody has that right, but the reality is quite different. The reality is quite different. He says it twice.
That's probably the editor who didn't catch that.
Okay, maybe.
Or he might have
Maybe
been
he said it twice. Maybe
but
he
the
muttered
reality
it.
is quite different.
Maybe he muttered it. Yeah, he might have muttered it. I don't remember. We have in this courthouse seen for years police officers come through these doors and talk about the injuries that they suffered, both physical and mental. We have seen the images over and over again of the attacks on the police. We have seen the images of the members of Congress and their staff cowering in fear. We have seen repeatedly how it affected the good people who were there that day, who simply were doing their jobs. And dare I say, Mr. Schaffer, I don't want to minimize your conduct because there's really no way to minimize it. I mean, your being there and present, although for less than 10 minutes, certainly encouraged others, gave them the strength to be there and perhaps engage in the kind of assaultive behavior and destruction of property and other conduct that yourself didn't engage in. But it says a lot about who you are and how quickly you came forward to accept responsibility. And that is a meaningful thing because The first step in understanding the consequences of any misconduct, and certainly on a day like January 6th, is to come forward and accept responsibility. It is not to fight the idea. It is not to cast the prosecution in political terms. It is not to suggest that, federal agents were in the crowd seeking to sort of create a false flag operation and trap supporters of the former president. None of that is true. And thankfully, Mr. Schaffer, much to your credit, you didn't engage in any of that. And that has inured to your credit. Miss Rakowski has been in front of me for a very long time, and for her to come forward and make the recommendation that she has carries a lot of weight with me. I want to say just for a moment, Mr. Schaffer, that I actually spent a few minutes yesterday listening to your music. I went online and pulled up some of the albums. It's not my cup of tea. That's where everybody kind of like laughed.
Everybody got a chuckle out of that comment. It was great. It was a much needed bit of relief when Judge Mehta said that. It got a laugh out of everybody in that room.
Now that said, that really doesn't matter, does it? Because as you well know, that is the beauty of music. It's all in the beholder, the ear of the beholder. It affects people in different ways. It touches people in different ways, and it evokes memories and experiences and moments. And the fact that is what you have committed your life to, and the fact that is what you have committed your life to, the fact that you have touched people in that way, not just here, but abroad, is really extraordinary. It is really extraordinary. And people have this image of somebody who's in a metal band, and you think, if you have this image that's evoked of somebody in a metal band, and I will say, Mr. Schaffer, from all I've read about you, wasn't exactly how I thought it would line up. So what does he mean? And so I really have admiration for what you've done in your career. And frankly, I think that the last point I simply want to make is this, which is it shouldn't come as a surprise to you or frankly anyone else who was involved in that day that there has been non-judicial consequences, reputational harm, challenges in your community. That is to be expected. I think, in my humble estimation, what has often been lost in all of this is the need for forgiveness, is the need to understand that people make mistakes. Even if people were there on January 6th, they make mistakes too. And the importance of forgiveness and understanding that the fact that someone was there that day and they did what they did should not be the black mark that defines them for the rest of their lives. We all make mistakes, some big, some small. But what really defines the person is how they address those mistakes and how they move in life going forward. And I dare say, Mr. Schaffer, you have certainly embodied what we would hope someone in your circumstances would do. Accept responsibility, make a commitment to ensuring that this kind of thing doesn't happen again, and making this world, which we all recognize is challenging and can be difficult, a better place. And you, thankfully, have a gift that many of us do not. To be able to do that, to reach people in ways that most ordinary people can't through your music and through your art and poetry. I hope that your community, your fans will forgive you because you deserve it. You deserve to be forgiven. And I think if people think hard about this and do forgive you, will be better off. So, for all those reasons, it's the judgment of the court that you, Mr. Schaffer, will be sentenced to a term of 36 months of supervised probation on counts 1 and 2. Those terms will run concurrently. In addition, you will be ordered to pay a special assessment totaling in $200. While you're on supervision, you shall abide by the following mandatory conditions as well as the discretionary conditions that are recommended in Part D of the sentencing options of the pre-sentence investigation report. Those conditions are imposed to establish the basic expectations for your conduct while on supervision. The mandatory conditions include not committing another federal, state, or local crime, not possessing a controlled substance. You must refrain from any unlawful use of a controlled substance. You must submit to one, actually, I'll suspend that because there's no history of it, so strike that.
Hmm.
I think he's talking about like
Potential drug test.
drug
Like
tests.
drug tests.
They're just not even going to do it. So
Yeah. There's no history of it.
No history of problems. You shall, however, cooperate in the collection of DNA as directed by the probation officer. You must make restitution as I will order in the amount of $1,000. I'll reduce that in half because Mr. Schaffer's conduct is quite different than others who were involved in the Oath Keepers and have had criminal consequences follow. That $1,000 simply needs to be paid by the end of the probationary term, and I'll ask that you begin paying that amount, Mr. Schaffer, in $50 monthly increments until that amount is paid in full. The court will not impose a further fine. You, however, must provide the probation officer access to any financial information and authorize the release of any financial information if it is requested either by probation or by the U.S. Attorney's Office. I will also ask that you perform 120 hours of community service as has been recommended. Your financial obligation to the court, that is, the $200, is immediately payable to the clerk of the court of the U.S. District Court for the District of Columbia at 333 Constitution Ave here in D.C. Within 30 days of any change of address, you shall notify the clerk of the court of the change until such time as the financial obligation is paid in full. The probation office is authorized to release the pre-sentence investigation report to all appropriate agencies, including the probation office of the approved district of residence, in order to execute the sentence of the court. So what that means, Mr. Schaffer, is that you'll be supervised locally. However, I will retain jurisdiction over the case such that if something comes up, it will come back to me. If you believe, Mr. Schaffer, that there is a basis for appeal consistent with your plea agreement, you shall file a notice of appeal within 14 days after the court enters judgment. If you are unable to afford the cost of an appeal, you may request permission from the court to file an appeal without cost to you. You may also request court-appointed counsel. And I'll just remind you that you have reserved your right to raise either on appeal or collaterally any claim of ineffective assistance of counsel or collateral based upon the discovery of new evidence. Okay, so with that, are there any objections or anything else anyone would like to put on the record at this time? Ms. Rakowski, not for the government, Your Honor, thank you. Mr. Markentel, not from the defense judge, the court, okay. All right, Mr. Schaffer, I know this has been a long road. You can certainly say that again. It's been 3.5 years or so since we last saw each other. I hope this marks a point of closure and the ability to kind of close this chapter and move forward. And again, I hope that you are forgiven by the people that are seeking it because you deserve it. And I hope you're able to resume your music career and make the contributions that I know you not only have, but will make. Take care. Thank you. Courtroom deputy, all rise. This court now stands in recess. And the proceedings concluded at 11:07 a.m. And the court reporter certified everything, and that is that.
And we would step outside and talk to a couple people and made a good day out of it.
Yeah, we did. We had a really nice time.
That was a good day.
It was a great day. Sorry, I was looking at all the different they have like a key, like a little courtroom key, like with different things, and Freddie Badalis came up again. Freddie Badalis.
Yeah. They said his name wrong.
They spelled his name wrong.
Yeah.
Well, at least we know how to spell it, so.
Yeah.
Anyway, so that concludes our court transcript reading. It was really awesome. Right now until December 12th, there is going to be a sale at the Iced Earth store. I'm wearing my Iced Earth Christmas shirt. It's pretty awesome. Yeah, look how awesome this is. If you go to the store, you could get 25 to 35% off depending on the item. Please support John Schaffer. He needs your support. And I know he loves you guys. And that'll be all. Woo!
No.
You want to
I hope this
and say goodbye?
I hope this video gets millions of hits because it needs it.
John Schaffer deserves this.
John Schaffer deserves it. None of us are perfect. Far from it. Okay.
Yeah, I knew he wasn't a part of some conspiracy that day,
You know,
so
he makes mistakes just like the rest of us do.
Yeah.
yes. And with that being said, I love you guys. Iced Earth forever, and we'll see you soon. Say goodbye to our fans and say goodbye to John Schaffer. Bye.
Goodbye, Mo. Cameo appearance with Mo the cat.
She loves to scream. You gonna say goodbye, Rusty? Wasn't that an intense court battle? Rusty supports John Schaffer. You want to say goodbye? Say goodbye, John Schaffer. Say goodbye, bye to all of our fans. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. I think we're going to come back and do some commentary on this very soon. We had a great time doing this, and we're so glad we can help John Schaffer in any way possible. Make sure to like and subscribe, and we'll see you next time.